Eh bien, nous souhaitons la bienvenue à Birthe Linddal.
La danoise Birthe Linddal a étudié les sciences sociales et l'histoire et s'est construit une réputation élevée depuis l'an 2000 en tant que futurologue. Elle est la futurologue du nord de l'Europe la plus souvent citée. Birthe Linddal arbeitete unter anderem am Copenhagener Institut.
Birthe Linddal travaille entre autres à l'Institut pour les études en futurologie et dans une agence publicitaire en publicité. Il y a 5 ans, elle a fondé sa propre entreprise car dans le cadre de son travail, le côté futurologue lui manquait et c'est à cela qu'elle s'est adonnée. Donc nous lui souhaitons une chaleureuse bienvenue. Cet exposé ne sera malheureusement pas traduit. Nous prions donc les auditeurs romands de l'écouter dans son original.
I have the pleasure to talk to you for the next 13 minutes, and we're going to talk about the future. First of all, I have to say that we do call it future research or future studies, but actually you can't study the future because in a scientific understanding, the future really doesn't exist. So you shouldn't understand what I'm saying here is like it was science. But I will spend some of the time telling about the methodology, how you can say something intelligent about the future. I also have to say that I am actually somehow a specialist in being a generalist regarding the future. I'm not a specialist in talking about the future of radio. I guess you are the specialist of the future of radio, but what I'm going to tell you the next 13 minutes is about what is happening around the future of radio. The agenda for the next half hour is why should we relate to the future, how to understand trends. Then I have taken out 4 of the most important mega trends and 4 of the most important imposing trends. And then in the end there will be a conclusion to it. What does that all mean to the future of radio? First of all, why should we relate to the future? I mean, the answer is quite simple, because you can change the future. Years ago, there was a lot of people thinking that the future was some kind of fixed thing. There might be a God somewhere defining what the future is, but it's not like that. The future is neither, a big train coming and driving very fast, and if you don't jump into it, then you're lost. The future is something you can influence. Every day when you wake up, you can decide yourself, oh God, you're gonna take the car, you want to take a bicycle. You can decide how you want to teach your kids. You can decide about you want to buy organic milk or you don't want to buy organic milk. You take a lot of decisions every day which influence the future. So the future is something you can influence, and that's why you have to deal with it. Also, what is happening right now is that things is going faster. So if you're not dealing with the future, if you don't dare to see into the future, then you might miss some possibilities. And suddenly one day there will be threats just in your face which you can't handle on because you were too long to see that change were happening. When we're talking about future studies, it's very normal to come with all kinds of statements regarding the future. Here are some of these statements. It's quite interesting statements, and we hear these kind of statements in the media and the discussions all the time. I wouldn't say that these statements are wrong, but what is happening with these statements, or what is true about these statements, are that people are taking only one variable and they're trying to define that future. But what is happening when we are looking 30 years ahead or 50 years ahead is that it's not only the numbers of people who are changing, the society around is also changing. So what you really have to be aware of when you're talking about the future is that it's not only one variable changing. If you're talking about the future of radio, it's not only the radio and the technology behind the radio which is changing. The way people think, the way people live is also changing. So you have to be careful with these kind of statements regarding the future, because there's lots of things changing in the future. It's not normal to talk about the future and to dream about the future. Here are some of the biggest and most world-famous novels about the future, and you can even see there from Jules Verne's in 1865 how they were having an idea about the future. But what is interesting when we are talking about the future is that science and technology always surpass imagination. As I said before, you have to realize that it's not only one thing changing. This is a picture from the 50s, and they're supposed to see what the future will look like in year 2010. And what is interesting with this picture is that somehow they have been very good at describing what the future will like, especially if we look into technology. They have realized that we will have screens. They have even a helicopter. We might not be that far. We have drones instead. But what is missing in this picture is that they haven't realized that the pattern of sex has changed. You know, the sexual rules in the house, that women, they go to work, maybe not in Switzerland, but in most of the Western world. I mean, the women with kids, not every woman. You have to realize that there's a man standing there and smoking. I mean, in the 50s, they haven't seen that our whole relationship to being more healthy, that the whole mega trends around health will happen. So the point with taking this picture is that you have to realize that a lot of things is changing, not only technology. But it seems that every time you're talking about the future, technology is often the only thing you're talking about. But you have to remember that technology is not the only thing changing. Everything changes. But what is very, very interesting here, now you really have to listen, is that though people's basic needs might not change over time, and some basic needs for people are to have food and to have warmth, but it's also to have love and community. Change is a part of modern life, but what is actually happening right now? What is the big change of tomorrow? I'm going to tell you about that now. When you should talk about the future and you should talk about how it's going to be, it's very modern to talk about trends. Within the last 10 years, everybody talks about trends, and almost every day when I read the media or I see the media or see news, people are talking about trends. But one thing which is very eager when you are a specialist in the methodology behind understanding trends is that a lot of people, they really don't know a lot about trends. So they count everything a mega trend and something they call a micro trend. And one day they said, oh, globalization is a big trend. And then on the other side, you can read that the thing that they put liquor into all kind of food is also a trend. And then somehow the thing about globalization and the thing about liquor becomes some equal kind of trends. But of course, we all know that the globalization as a trend is much more wide, much more important than the thing about liquor and everything. So, as a futurist dealing with trends on a professional level, we are trying to make some kind of methodology. We're having a methodology where we're trying to understand trends. And the methodology that most of us is using is, I'm trying to picture here in a quite simple way. What we have to realize is that megatrends is the most important tool of being a future researcher. And the thing is that, especially when people are talking about trends, everybody wants to call everything for megatrends. But megatrends actually have a very, very strong definition within futurology. A megatrend is only a megatrend if it affects almost everything. You can also call megatrends a dynamics of change. I will come later I'll come back to what kind of megatrends is very important. We can, as example, say it's a trend right now that people want to buy organic food. It's a huge trend, but it's not a mega trend because it doesn't affect everybody. But technology, individuality, and the search of more sustainable future is a mega trend because it almost affects everything. But I have this way of this methodology. First, you have the mega trend. That's the most important thing because they are kind of the motor for the smaller trend. Then you have a trend which is called more specific mechanism of change. It could be that you buy organic food. It could be that you eat more takeaway. It could be that you are using your mobile device. Then we also have something called upcomings and gimmicks. This is, small phenomenons, small trends, which you don't really know about what will happen here. Will it be something? And then finally you have things and phenomenon, which is isolated phenomenon. And here we have some liquid powder, because the thing that you put liquid into something is a phenomenon. It's not really a trend. I'll just try to give you an example of how we're using this. A megatrend, as an example, digitization. Then you have a trend, which is result of the megatrend. This is the Internet of Things. And then you have some upcomings. This is the thing about private civilians. I mean, this is how it trends, but we don't really know how big is it going to be, how will it affect our lives. And then suddenly you have a thing, a phenomenon, which is an app. And then you have something which is interesting. And now we are with actually the most interesting part, because later when I would tell you something about the most important megatrends, none of you, since you're in the radio business, you're well-educated, smart people who read news, you know the megatrend. This will not be new. But what you have here is the opposite trend. And the opposing trend is much more insecure. How should I say? It's much more... What's actually happening here? All we futurists around the world, we really agree about the megatrends. You know them. But these opposing trends are much more difficult, because something is here, but what is it? And what is really striking with opposing trends is that somehow opposing trend is a critique of a megatrend. Because a megatrend like urbanism or more wealth, I mean, sometimes when you're listening to the way we speak about them and we take them for granted, we think, oh yes, urbanism has been here for years. Of course, everybody will move to the big cities. But then you have this opposing trend where something else is happening. And I'll show you now some of the opposing trends. But first, what is the most important megatrends for the time being? I have taken 16 of the most important megatrends. I could also have taken 24, but then I need another list, so I just took 16. And those I have highlighted are those I think is the most important for the future of radio. But then you have these opposing trends, and that's really where it becomes interesting. And I have a list of some of the 16 biggest opposing trends seen from my point of view. There might be quite some future researchers who agree with me, but there will also be room for discussions about this. It's not so fixed as the megatrends. And those I have highlighted regarding the future of radio are community, offline, antony, and disruption. What is the most important megatrend when we are talking about the future of radio? What will change the future of radio? The first of the four one is technology. Technology is a huge megatrend and have been it for years. Right now we are seeing that the robots are coming. On my way to Zurich, I just read 2 books, and they're all talking about this new technology change. And even these 2 books were not the same author. One was written in America, another one was written in Denmark. They all say that a lot of the jobs we are having, they will change. Some of them actually say that half of the jobs we are having today will not be there in the future. I don't think that figure will. I think it's a bit too high, but a lot of things is happening with this technology. We will have new energy sources, we will have drones, we will have self-driving cars, the biotech. Well, what's actually happening when we have the self-driving cars? Do we want to sit and read a book instead of listen to radio? Because we just heard radio is what we are doing when we're driving in a car. Oh, and what's happening with these driverless cars? Will we ever come? When are they here? Actually, the technology is already here. What we are waiting for is that the governments, they have to figure out the rules. They have to figure out the legislation of how should we actually code this car? How far should it go? And how should it decide if an accident happens? Should it decide to save the kid or save the driver, as an example? But these robots are coming. There's a lot of technological change right now. And a part of this technology change will also affect the future of radio. I just want to hear you. Are you ready for the technological change? Are you ready for driving in a driverless car? How many of you are ready to go normally I say, well, if you want to go skiing in the Alps from Denmark, but I mean, it's nice to put yourself in a car in the evening and wake up in the mountain next morning. How many of you would sit yourself in a car, make yourself asleep, and wake up in Samad in 5 hours? Would you dare to do that? How many would dare to do it? Some of you. But most of you won't dare to. Oh, I think it would be so lovely that you could just sleep when you're driving in a car. The robots are coming, the technology is coming. It's a huge mega trend. Have you just seen a little bit of it? Technology never stops moving. You have to be aware of that. Another very important mega trend when we're talking about future radio is digitization. And we can say that this is the biggest shift since the industrial revolution. And what is digitization all about? It's very much about connectivity. And it's interesting with the digital media is that in the 80s, when you started to have computers and realized this was happening, everybody thought, oh, people are going to be lonely. They will sit in their room with their Commodore 64, and the curtains will be off, and no one will talk with each other. But what's actually happening is that no one really imagined that you will have social media. And that was because, as I said in the beginning, when people are thinking about the future, they keep on thinking about the future as only being technology. But what's very interesting with this digitization, the internet and the way we use it is that it has had this social element. And that's also an element you have to be aware of when we are talking about the future of radio. Because right now, because of this digitization and the things going on there, people think, oh, they will all search for their own radio program. They will all be individual, and the technology can give them exactly what they want. But you still have to remember that the digitization is not a different world. The internet is not a different world. A lot of people, they talk like the internet is something different. The internet is just a tool. And Facebook is like a mean thing. Facebook doesn't have a brain, it's just a tool. It's the way you use it. And that's the same with technology for radio. It's only technology, it's human needs and behavior behind it which makes the future. And you have to be aware of the fact that when people are listening to radio, they are also doing it very much because they want to know what's going on. The future of radio is not only technology. Digitization is here. It's going very, very fast. I just take this example from Moore's Law. I probably think you all have heard about Moore's Law, how fast it's going. The development is exponential. If the car industry should have experienced the same development like the computer technology have done from 1971 to 2014, a car will today drive 300,000 kilometers an hour, 2 million miles per gallon, and cost only 4 cents. That's what you have seen, development you have seen within the digital evolution in the last few years. Here's just a digital snapshot. I mean, this one is not so clear. This is the population, the total population, and the numbers underneath is the penetration. And as you can see now, more than half of the world population are on the internet. And 35% is using social media. It's coming. And what is really coming in the nearby future is this, what we call mixed and augmented reality, where you take the digital tools and use them in real life. Here are some examples, Google Glasses, and how you can integrate screens in your daily life here in your car window. Was something? Maybe it's coming. Another very important mega trend when we are talking about the future of radio is individualization. Individualization is a very, very important mega trend. It's a dynamics of change which have been going on for hundreds of years, but especially the last 20, 30 years, it has gone very fast. The younger generation, especially those under 50, 40 years, they are thinking as individuals. And what is going on right now is that everyone who is selling products to these kind of people, they want to give them individual products. Individualization is very much about me, about customized products. People want to have a personal position. But what is also interesting when we are talking about individuality is that it also makes people very uncertain. It's hard to be an individual. That's why so many young people are having problems these days, because it's hard to be a star in your own life and be different and keep on being different. Somehow it was much easier 30 and 40 years ago where you could just blend in. Actually, it might also be hard to figure out every day, what should I hear in the radio? Instead of just taking what's there. Individualization is good, but it's very good for the strong people, the people with a lot of skills, the people who can choose. But this is not all people. To be a very strong individual needs that you need some strength, you need some knowledge, you need some education as well. As I said before, the mixed realities here, the virtual reality. I'm sure a lot of you remember this film, this old film, Tom Cruise when he was still young. Customized reality. And when we see today, you always have this customized reality. Every time I go in and search on the web, I got all these commercials. I have a daughter, she's 6 years old, and I spend a lot of time when I have to relax looking at clothes for her, and it keeps on coming these commercials. You have your own screen, no, you have your own device where you have your own programs, you have your own Facebook profile, you have what you need. You go into Netflix and you choose the films you want to see, the series you want to see. So this customized reality is already there. And you also have a picture from the airport in Copenhagen where they have started to put the advertisements, you know, when it's flights coming in with business people, it's business advertisement, it's flights coming in with charter tourists, and it's advertising for them. And you will see more and more of this, where it goes more and more down to the exact person. Another very interesting megatrend, which is also interesting, it might be as a big surprise somehow that I take this one, but it's the thing about time pressure. Modern people, they're very busy. There's so much they want to do. They want it all. They want to have a career, they want to have family, they want to do a lot of sport, they want to travel the world. They want to optimize their life. And that's a very good reason for a lot of people to choose the radio programs they want, because they want special knowledge about stock exchange or health or politics or how to make a better cake. People are greedy and then they get stressed. They want to be effective. They're part of the hamster wheel somehow. And you have to realize that how and when people use the radio is in a stressed world for a lot of people. They only have 24 hours a day. They might live a little bit longer. And especially the very modern, the strongest of them, they're very keen on what are they using my minutes for. But we also have to realize when we are talking about this time pressure, there is something called actual time. I'm sorry that you might not see these because it's very small. It says actual time, it says mental time. The actual time is the minutes you're passing by. And you might actually have 3 minutes to listen to the radio. But if you have been in the office for 8 hours, discussed with a lot of people, you have to realize you have to go home and cook for 3 kids because your wife is for yoga, you might not have the mental time, the mental energy to listen to the radio. So you might turn some music on, or maybe you will just shut everything down and just want it to be quiet. So when we're talking about megatrends and time pressure, it's very important to be aware that there is this difference between the mental time and the actual time. And what is the opposing trends? I think these 4 megatrends I just presented for you, I think it might not be of any big surprise for you. But what is the opposing trends here? And how can these opposing trends affect the future of radio? One opposing trend which is quite strong right now is community. Or I might better say the longing for more community. Especially the young people, Generation U, Generation Z, those who are under 30 years. They are lonely, a lot of them. I mean, they might not be lonely in that sense that they don't talk with their parents, that they don't have friends, but they don't have a lot of strong communities because they have to choose all the time. They have to choose about they want to be a hippie or they want to be a football player or they want to be one in a shirt or they want... Modern people are living in tribes. They're not giving community as for the older people. They were born into a community, into a village where almost everybody was the same. Today, people are different. And what you see with young people, and you also actually see it with elders, that they are longing for communities. Those who are born around the wartime, they have lots of communities. They go to parties and they meet each other because they're born in a traditional world where community was something which was just there. But then after the 68, people have spent a lot of time taking away all the rituals, the community, and today you have to choose. But it's difficult to choose. And then we end up again that being an individual, a strong individual who can choose whoever I want to be a part, who I want to be in the community with. It's not that many people who can choose that. So there is a longing for community, and that's important when we are talking about the future of radio. Because what you probably have realized when you're listening to Spotify or you're listening to an e-book on the way home in your car, you can't talk with your wife or your husband or your kids about it because they haven't read the same book. I think that when we're talking about the future of radio, I think here you really have to see what's going on here, because the idea that everybody in the future will pick the radio exactly for them, I don't believe in it. Because people need something in common. And they need something which is not there. No, which is just there, that they don't have to choose for. And the radio is one of the things people often have had in common, because and the television, people kind of see the same, or of course it's not as it used to be, but you have to be aware of the thing that people are longing for community. They want unity, they want roots, they want meaningfulness. Because loneliness kills, and especially among the young people, you have a lot of statistics about that. But one of the things which is quite interesting when we are talking about individuality and community in today's society is that for a lot of young people, it's difficult to know how they should establish and maintain a good community. It sounds very banal when I say it, and you can think, but it's not difficult. But if you haven't been used to family rituals, if you always have been said, but you can choose who you want to invite home for a coffee, you can choose who you're going to play with. And if you always have gone into institutions where you have put in these, it's actually not a skill a lot of young people have. Because they haven't learned it, because they have raised them in a society with parents who put all the effort in making them individual and special and longing for their own potential. So a lot of young people, under 40, 30, they actually don't know how to establish a good community. And what you also have to be aware of is that if we have nothing in common, there will be no community. So I think if there should be a radio in the future, to broadcasting in the future, you have to realize that people need to have something in common. Another opposing trend is this I'm going to call anti-me. For years, there has been this focus on the individual. As I said, individuality is the mega trend. That's what's going on in the whole of the Western world and also starting in the developing world. But what you see right now is this transfer underneath that people, they don't want to be special anymore. It's so boring to be special. People want community. So you see this search for anonymity, for privacy, for community. People will be allowed just to be themselves. Because the thing is that we go around and say, oh, we want individual people. But what has happened within the last 10 years, especially among the young, is that the norm for what is good is being more and more smaller. You have to take higher education, you have to look a certain way, you have to use a certain brands. You cannot even play in a brass band or be something spider or something, because that's what the ideal. So somehow you have this individuality, the idea of individuality, but at the same time you have these young people who are fighting just to be themselves instead of living into this idea of individuality, which in the end is a very narrow ideal of how you should be. So we have this opposing trend, which is going away from the individual and looking for community and looking for more, I call it anti-me, anonymity. And you see it actually, there's a lot of examples on it. I just took one example. Here is an app you can use, so you can go on the net being an anonymous person, so everybody can't see who are there. I will also state these two books. This is a local story from Denmark. The man here, he's a professor in psychology, and he's one of the most popular people in Denmark. He wrote these books called Hold On and Standpoints, which is a kind of, it's a critique of this modern society where this big focus on individuality and that the individuals should find the answer in themselves. He says there is no answer in there. The answer is in the communities, what we have always done. If you want to learn something about life, you should read books. You shouldn't go to a coach. This is, and then you have, numbers of old classical good books about how tough life can be and how happy you can be. The thing is that if you want this man to come out and make a presentation for you, you have to wait almost 3 years. He's so popular. And the thing which he's touching is less eye focus, less navel grazing, less self-actualization, less narcissism. This is the opposing trend, anti-me. And then we have another anti-trend. This is called offline. I mean, we see it already. There's all these people who don't want to be at Facebook because they think Facebook is a main world, and they're trying not to, and it's also kind of, in some circles, it's very almost popular to say that they hate the social media and so on. But there is this opposing trend that we spend too much time on social media. We are too focused on this iPhone. We keep on sitting there. So you have this opposing trend of life, because life is bigger. And I just took this, this is a novel written in San Francisco. I hate the internet. And this is an author writing about all the bad sides of the internet. One of his points is that all the people making the money of the internet are those who make the tool, where all those who make the content, they make it for free. But this is just an example of a lot of people actually hate the internet. They hate the social media. Not that they can't live without it, but it's also popular to hate it because people are longing for going offline. And one thing which is related to that is that there have been this idea coming together with the growing digitalization, that when you see the young people and they're on the computer, they're on the laptop, and the other side they have their phone, that you have the idea that young people, they can multitask. It's also a story that women are good at multitasking. But you have made a lot, there have been made a lot of research about that in the last few years, which shows that multitasking is bad. And those who multitask, they do their job much worse than those who doesn't. So this is also a very good idea of going offline. If you want to be more effective at your office, you should say, I can go on social media between 8 and 9, and then you should shut it down, and then you should go again, maybe between 8 and 9 in the evening. And then you have the whole day to concentrate about your work. And you actually see more and more companies shutting down for some of these social media things, so people can't sit there and be distracted when they have to do their work. Because the greatest gift you can give someone is attention. And the best way to insult someone is to ignore them. You have to think about this next time you're on a cafe and you're all sitting there with your little mobile device. The last anti-trends I have taken, the opposing trends I have taken with is what I call disruption. And you can, of course, discuss about, is it really a opposing trend, or is it going to be a real trend? but it's quite a difficult word. I have taken it as an opposing trend. We see disruption everywhere. Disruption, the want to change. We have to rethink, reinvent, and reposition. And that's also when we are talking about the future of radio. This is 10 of the most well-known disruptors. Spotify, Netflix. You've seen how these new services have changed the way we use media within the last 10 years. What is actually interesting here is that, again, it's the technology which are driving this. And sometimes when you have more physical products, you can think that the development is only technology. But what is interesting here is the technology as a tool to giving people what they want. It can also be milk for your morning food that can be disrupted. The way you got the milk, even if it's still milk from cows, it's just the logistics about how the milk gets to you. One of the things I will mention when we see this list is that if you take, as an example, take the normal book, it's interesting because everybody thinks, oh, we don't going to have books in the future. We're going to stop having books because we can get them on these services much cheaper. But the funny thing is that people keep on buying books. And new research actually shows that when people read a book on the screen, or if they're listening to it, they can't remember it as well as they're reading books on paper. And about this is about cultural behavior or tradition, or there is something in it. I wouldn't say about this. But the reason why I'm telling this story is because sometimes when you are looking into the future and you're seeing technology, then you think everything will be taken over by technology. But there's lots of examples of technology which have not been a success. I mean, in the 80s, they started to make a machine who could make coffee, so when you wake up in the morning and go down to the kitchen, the coffee would be made. But none of us are having such a machine, because that's not really what we need. So you have to be aware of the fact that we have very great technology and digital opportunities for the moment, which might disrupt, but they might not disrupt everything. And the big and interesting thing is, how is it going to disrupt? And therefore, you have to realize, what is the basic needs of people? Do people really need this? Can it make a positive change in people's life? Time is running out. And what does all this mean for the future of radio? I have tried to give you a few answers during my speech. But I want you to reflect on this when you go back. Because as I said, I'm not a specialist in the future of radio. I just want to give you this input of what is actually going on around. There was a lot of more opposing trends, a lot of more mega trends we could have talked about, but this was just a little snapshot. What will he be listening to in 2025? That's the question. And finally, I have a few conclusions. The future is something you can influence. All of us can influence it. The future is more than new technology, and you really have to realize that when you're talking about the future of radio, because when you read articles about it, when you hear people talking about it, they're so keen on this new technology and what it can do. But you have to remember there are people out there with hearts and brains and feelings, and who are in love and who are not in love, who are angry, and it's all about people. It's not only technology that changes. The future of radio is also much more than new technology. I just said that. It's all about people's need. But you have to realize that you have to make customized radio for people longing for more community. I don't know exactly how you're going to do it, but I think that's the task. People are longing for something bigger than themselves, because people are so tired, especially the young ones, of being a star and always have to figure everything out for themselves. There's this feeling of just following. Innovation is also giving people what they don't want, they need. And that's what you should give them in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.